start the session, some brief information about the Lieutenant Arjun Choudhary. He is currently Deputy Director of Center for Cyber Security, Sardar Patel University of Police since 2014. He was earlier associated with the State Bank of India as a assistant manager system and was instrumental in implementing cybersecurity related newly developed strategy across Himachal Pradesh, Jammu Kashmir, Haryana, Punjab. And his current interests include cybersecurity, cloud computing, security, digital forensic, e-governance, and machine learning. He is information security management system lead auditor. He is also a certified ethical hacker and certified EC counselor instructor. He has been instrumental in organizing various international and national training programs for law enforcement and agencies. He is a visiting faculty at North Police Academy, Shillong, the Security Force, Intelligence Bureau, Rajasthan Police Academy, Jaipur, Rajasthan Police Center, Jodhpur, Rajasthan Police Training School, Jodhpur, Expert Promotion Council of Handicraft, Indian Religion IGNU Center. He also has co-authored many journal and conference publication, and he has many book chapters also. So, welcome you, sir.
So your voice is breaking.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, it's fine now. It's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So I need to connect again with my mobile rather than with the laptop itself. So I'm using the laptop for the presentation mode and I'll be speaking with the mobile. If it is okay with everyone.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yeah.
You can share your slide using the.
Yeah. I'll be just doing it, sir. How I can share my share content, right? I hope everyone can see my slide.
Yes, sir, it's visible, sir.
Visible.
Thank you. Um, First of all, I would like to thanks all the organizers from the Manipal University, especially Dr. Prince Randhawa and Michael Bukia sir, to invite me as the speaker in this esteemed like, the program itself. And for the last 4 days or so, even I've been the part of the listening mode here, and was trying to gather as much as possible from the particular sessions. And must say the sessions were quite invigorating and thought-provoking. And like today, the topic is related with my domain itself, that is cybersecurity. And as the topic was discussed with the concerned faculties who have been organizing this particular FDP program, so without wasting much time, I'll be just discussing in detail about the cybersecurity, keeping you a little bit away from the technicalities of the AI itself, because I hope that for the last 4 days or so, you would be filled with the AI and the technical stuff. But now I'll be just taking you just like a new particular thing, which is again a part of AI or the application area of the AI. That is the role of AI and the machine learning in the improving the cyber security of various industries itself. So, there are a lot of challenges when we are talking about cyber security. Since cybersecurity is kind of an umbrella term here, we are just assuming that this is not a single stream or so. Uh, just one quick instructions to all the listeners here. Uh, Wherever you think that yes, you need to ask a question or so, you please stop me right away at that point of time, so that it would be better to have that context ready at that moment, and then we can jump to the conclusion or the answer itself. So that would be the convenient mode of interaction here. And I believe that this is the way through which we can make the session more interactive in manner. Okay, so I hope everyone is okay with that particular way of handling the thing from the organizers' parts as well. Yes, fine, yeah, yeah, thank you. So when we are talking about the cyber security, this is a particular umbrella term which comprises of a lot of branches altogether, like be it cloud, be it IoT, be it information technology, be it digital forensics, you can say audiovisual technology, multimedia technology. Everywhere you need to have cyber security, and eventually these all are coming under the umbrella term of cyber security here. So when we are talking about cybersecurity, first thing that is like there is a myth of that. I usually put a slide of that, but yes, I haven't put the slide. But yes, can anyone tell me that what is the biggest myth in the terms of cybersecurity? Any particular myth, and I consider it to be the biggest one. And nowadays there are companies running out of that particular part itself. Any enthusiast audience, if they want to put into chat box or so, that would be great. Okay. So, in my point of view, that the 100% security, that means that yes, we are secure at every cost. This is not possible. This is again a myth only. So, whenever we are putting some security barricades or some measures like access control mechanisms or identity and access management or any kind of access management, be it biometrics, be it with the help of your three or multi-factor authentications itself, everything can be hackable at any cost itself. So this is again the myth, and eventually we try to just reach to that level when we are talking about this, that this is a particular optimum level of reaching the security itself. If we'll just compare your room as a security parameter, what is the level of security you would understand from this particular kind of room? If the answers goes that your windows, your doors are the level of your security in that parameter itself. Yes, there is a particular variety of mechanism through which we can increase or make the complexity in the security itself, like defense in depth or manifold role-based access control or variety of models are there. So, going towards the challenges of the cyber security, first challenge is geographically distant IT system itself. So, what does it mean actually? Like probably like right now we are sitting somewhere else and we are handling the things from somewhere other location itself. Like this Corona time has showcased the things in a real time and in a real example manner itself. Like you are teaching from a particular place, your native place itself. Probably you're teaching in a certain location which is located at somewhere totally different scenario or geographical like location itself. So whenever we are talking about these kind of IT systems management, so there are a lot of incidents being done on a regular basis. Okay, and when we are talking about incidents, that can be of any type itself. Like it can be like the data leakage itself, or hacking into the system. Sometimes just looping a particular CCTV camera itself. So there are a lot of things coming into the pictures, and while doing the tracking of those incidents, it is next to impossible in a manual manner itself. So we need to have cybersecurity experts to overcome those difficulties and those distance to monitor the infrastructure in a successful manner itself. Okay, so for that, a particular stream of incidents response is responsible for managing the incidents in a cybersecurity domain itself. Similarly, when we are talking about manual threat hunting itself, what do you mean by threat hunting here in the cybersecurity domain? Any ideas over the topic itself? Anyone? Princey ma'am?
Yes, sir.
I'm just asking, like, if the participants can message or call or what?
Yeah. They have an access, so they can unmute your and they can ask.
Okay, that's great.
Also, they have this access to chat box also.
Okay. So, I'm not having access of the chat box, but yes, if you feel there are some questions in the chat box,
Yeah,
you please
actually,
nominate.
yeah. If you
Pardon?
are talking from mobile phone, then I think it is restricted from mobile phone. You cannot access this chat box.
Okay, that's fine. What I'll do is I'll again join with my desktop also, because with the laptop, what is happening? I can just see my like presentation only. I cannot shift the screens itself.
Uh, Sir, if anything comes in the chat section, so chat box, I will let you know.
Sure.
But participants, they have an access of they
Chat
can
itself. Yeah.
they can talk.
Okay, good to go. Like I'm assuming itself, like most of the participants are having a basic understanding of the cybersecurity here. So when we're talking about the threat hunting itself, threat hunting is something like to identify some vulnerabilities, and eventually those vulnerabilities are pre-existing with the help of like some zero-day vulnerabilities into the dark web or so, and eventually like these particular threat, these are considered as a threat for the organization itself, because these are not into the current market or in the public domain itself. These are being bought and shared in the conglomerate of dark web itself, where they want to just like gather some monetary benefit out of it. So this is something like a very difficult scenarios when we are talking about threat hunting. And threat hunting is something like you know in an organization, when we are talking about cybersecurity division itself, there would be a separate divisions into that, like threat hunting, SOC, NOC, or SOAR itself. Like there are a lot of divisions altogether into the picture. So in that also, when we are talking about threat hunting, which is being done currently in a manual manner, that means that you are searching for the vulnerabilities which are existing, but yes, somehow not in the public domain currently. So for those particular threat huntings, it can be really expensive, because while just negotiating with the dark web people, you need to pay some amount in terms of some cryptocurrency or digital currency itself. So can anyone give me a vague idea about how much a particular zero-day vulnerability of a Windows 10 would cost if you're going to buy from the dark web itself? Anyone?
I request all the participants to please make this session interactive.
I
You can
hope
ask
this is
questions and
okay.
you can interact with the speaker.
Ma'am, I'm just trying to make it as much as interactive possible, so that participant would gather much knowledge out of it rather than just listening to it.
Yeah,
If it is
yes,
okay
sir.
with everyone.
It's a very important topic actually.
Yeah. So, just giving you a brief idea that if you are going to buy a particular zero-day vulnerability, which is existing into the current operating system version itself, but yes, currently it is not in the public domain, you need to shell out around more than $5,000 for a single vulnerability. And again, the vulnerabilities are based on like how much it is pre-existing for the longer duration of time. Longer the duration, larger would be the cost itself. And when we are talking about the threat hunting in the terms of identifying from these kind of hidden markets, or sometimes you do the security analysis of the products as well, or the services as well. So it's a time-consuming process itself. So it actually results into some more unnoticed attacks. What we are talking about, there are a lot of attacks in the past also, Operation Flame was there, which was actually hosted from a particular country known as Israel, and eventually like they had to just install some certain malware into the systems, and it propagated across the world itself. And all the conglomerates, all the corporates or industry people were not able to identify even after 7 or 8 years down the line itself. So again, it is quite difficult. It's a challenge for the cybersecurity personnel altogether if they are doing the manual threat hunting itself. Okay, as well as when we are talking about reactive nature of cybersecurity, a company can resolve problems only after they have already happened itself. It is something like if the problem has occurred or if a particular incident has occurred, then only we can start working in making a defense mechanism of that particular thing. When we are talking about this kind of nature, you might have everyone might have used the antivirus itself. you know uh, I never use antiviruses at my desktop or my laptop itself. What is the reason behind it? Because antivirus companies are basically working on a certain principle, that is like, if a particular crime has occurred or if a particular kind of vulnerability has occurred in a particular system, now it has been reported to the particular antivirus company. Now they are making the signature out of it. Now they are just making money out of that particular signature. So, just remember the WannaCry ransomware, which occurred in the last 3 or 4 years down the line. And because of that, the world was at still standstill, like, and a lot of hospitals, a lot of people were like stranded at a certain location altogether. So, after that particular incident, the ransomware come into the picture, and eventually, like, ransomware is the hot topic right now when we are talking about the cybersecurity domain itself. So, when we are talking about these kind of incidents, based on that incident, the companies decide that yes, I need to now look out for certain ransomwares also to safeguard my customers or the subscribers altogether. So, we are always into the reactive nature rather than the proactive nature. So, if you need to predict the threats before they occur, is actually a great challenge in terms of for the security experts who have been regularly into the domain to secure the mechanisms, to secure the infrastructure, to secure the processes altogether. So these things are actually are the need of our right now. Okay. Similarly, moving together for the last point, that is like hackers often hide and change their IP addresses and eventually jump from one IP to another IPs with the help of a lot of proxy servers and the chain of proxy servers altogether. So they use VPN, they use proxy servers, they use Tor browsers, which is based on a Tor network, which is working on onion routing algorithms itself. So with the help of that, actually hackers stay anonymous and undetected. And again, it poses a lot of, when we are talking about the challenge towards the law enforcement agencies to identify those people who are actually behind those particular tasks, it is quite difficult and getting difficult day by day itself. So these are the certain challenges what I have posed in front of you while just creating a particular platform for the use of AI in the terms of cybersecurity and various industry people itself. Okay. So when we are talking about the cybersecurity science itself, this is a particular slide which has been taken from the McKinsey and Company itself. So they have been talking about the risk reduction and the resilience, but still, like, there are a lot of work needs to be done and to create the capabilities in terms of cybersecurity itself. So cyber resilience is the term to just accept the risk or sometimes to reduce the risk itself. Risk mitigation does have a lot of strategies, like risk identification is there, then you need to accept the risk sometimes, you need to share the risk sometimes, you need to reduce the risk sometimes, or sometimes you need to avoid the risk all the time. So, they have just identified into the two different categories. One is the foundational one, and then there is an advanced one itself. So, when we are talking about the foundational one, they are actually like considering security is the least parameter here. And again, when we are talking about these kind of things, this is the level of maturity, and this is the like moving towards the advanced way of. So it is something like the graph is something like constantly increasing, and they are maturing themselves with the help of self-assessment with or without the benchmarks to highlight the capability gaps itself. There are a lot of benchmarks. All are the faculties here. Definitely, you would have read about the research methodology itself. So, while talking about the benchmarks, the first thing is coming into the picture that you need to have a reference point while going with a new technology or having a new technology amalgamated into your infrastructure altogether itself. Okay, so for that, in the foundational one, you need to build the capabilities based on some like essential security and the resilience foundations, fundamentals to plug the gaps. You need to analyze the gap itself. So first thing, as an organization, just assume that we are an educational institution itself. Right now, we are assuming ourselves that yes, right now we have least worry to just put our infrastructure for the common people across the world itself. But yes, if we'll just contact a particular cybersecurity personnel or a person who is trying to strengthen the critical infrastructure of your institution itself, they will try to find out the gaps. It all depends on the context itself, like what kind of risk you are having right now. you know, uh, while going for the auditing part, there is an information security auditing also. So for that also, we usually identify the risk based on the context itself, rather than the device itself or the being the objectivity of that particular device itself. Just giving an example, like right now, if you are having a particular router or so, so for that router, if you are trying to identify the risk, it always depends on the context itself. What is the context here? The context is like if the router is hosted in a particular institution which is of educational nature, but yes, this is a public domain where every student is having the right to access to the internet, and somehow the medium through which they are getting connected is the router itself. Okay, but yes, if this router is being put at certain labs like some defense and research development labs of government of India itself, now the context has changed drastically. So now when we are talking about the risk analysis, now this particular router does have a huge risk involved while just accessing the particular configuration of that particular router itself. So we need to identify the gaps based on certain principles as well as with the context itself. So we need to establish a certain operating model of a cybersecurity, and based on that, you need to implement some cybersecurity access mechanisms or so. And based on that, you actually build your capabilities in a foundational kind of institutions. But moving towards the advanced one, we need to reduce the enterprise-based risk, and we need to identify the risk as I have mentioned. We need to prioritize our like the processes need to be prioritized. We need to develop. We need to measure and manage the things. Yes, Rajneesh ji, you have any question? Okay. So when we are talking about any particular kind of controls, we need to understand that how need to manage the things. We need to develop a lot of security models itself. We need to create some risk appetite thresholds for every linked key risk itself. There are KPI and KPI periods are there, key performance indicators. Based on that, we can identify that yes, this particular key performance indicator is not performing really well, which was supposed to be done. So based on that, we can identify the risk associated with this particular KPI period itself. Okay, moving towards the holistic resilience and digital trust itself. For that, you need to have the next generation technologies amalgamated with your current infrastructure, what you are having right now. So while living the next generation technology, what we are having is the AI and the ML itself to reduce the detection and the response time itself. We'll discuss in the further slides that yes, how we are going to reduce the detection and the response time while we are talking about the cybersecurity in various domains of the industry itself. Okay, so we need to embed the security in technology products, services, and processes from inception to execution to achieve security by design itself. We would have read all participants like software development life cycle itself. But yes, when we are talking about software development life cycle, we have never read about the cybersecurity at what location, at what step you need to implement or amalgamate the cybersecurity or the security posture into your the development life cycle itself. So nowadays, when we are talking about SDLC of any particular IT industry, security is infested into that thing by design itself. So if we are putting that thing on a regular basis, since your designing part, or just like idea, you are giving an idea itself. So in your ideas also, when we are talking about the security, that means you are reaching to the zenith level of advanced holistic realistic resilience and digital trust itself. Okay, so this is something like a standard model which the current the McKinsey and company has showcased and try to maintain a particular thing into the current industrial scenario itself. So moving on further, they have also created certain action areas which can be mapped to the industry standards. And believe you me, the standards what we are talking is not only the single standard. There can be manifold industrial standards itself. This has been referenced with the NIST itself. But yes, it is not only the single standard. There can be many different standards. NIST is something like not a enforcing agency. This is something like a non-enforcing agency, but yes, they provide a lot of standards in the terms of cybersecurity domain itself, be it cipher suits, be it for industry or for the academia itself. So they have identified the 7 action areas while talking about the industry standards itself. COBIT is there, ITL is there, ISO 27001 is there. So based on that, there are a lot of standards, and we need to identify and map those standards with the action areas which McKinsey and company has showcased here. They need to prioritize the information assets and related risk itself. So we need to prioritize the whatever the information assets are being held with a particular company. We need to identify, we need to assess them, and based on that, we need to create a strategy and create a roadmap to how to use them, how to use them continually as well, right? Like when we are talking about continually, there comes a particular term that is BCP, business continuity program itself. Okay, so you need to prioritize based on that, and uh, risk would be evaluated eventually itself. Okay, you need to enlist frontline personnel itself. What are the particular personnel who are actually responsible for running a particular process or so? We need to enlist them. We need to make aware about the current existing scenarios. Like there are a lot of particular terms which usually comes into the picture while talking about the cyber security. I hope everyone has read about the phishing itself. So phishing is something like giving a particular link or so to a certain group of people itself. But in phishing, a particular term which is known. The phishing attack is specifically designed for the top C's. ये C's कौन से हो सकते हैं? These can be CTO, this can be CEO, CFO, or CISO itself. So these are the particular people who can be the target of that particular phishing attack, which is known as whaling itself. And if these people are not aware that what kind of attacks are currently possibly ongoing, so that is again a disaster waiting for the particular company itself. You need to also like train your employees and the contractor of the security itself. Most of the time in current scenario also, believe you me, right now 90% of the companies are actually relying on other third-party people or the personnel to enhance the security in their own infrastructure itself. Okay, and we need to improve that particular structure with the help of a talent recruitment and the development in your in-house team itself. Yes, that is there. We need to integrate cyber resilience into enterprise-wide processes. Like we need to develop the product security. We need to work on the vendor and the third-party management itself, because many times it has been seen. It has been seen with the examples also. While talking about a variety of attacks, mostly attacks are being targeted and propagated with the help of the third-party management itself, because they eventually have the access of those infrastructures remotely as well. Okay, so we need to identify the risk reporting and the metrics. Particular first like MITRE, you can just go and search about this particular metrics management, through which we can identify the risk, we can evaluate, we can categorize the risk itself. So that is much needed. Moving on further, there is a particular action area known as develop integrated incident response itself. Like any particular incident has occurred, we need to do the simulations or do the like red team, blue team kind of exercises all the time. But yes, again, when we are talking about these kind of exercises, can we do it automated? with the help of AI or ML, yes, we can do it, but yes, we need to define and identify these kind of risk itself. Moving further, integrate security into technological environments. So assets, configuration, patch managements, like n number of securities when we are talking about like nowadays UEM is there when we are talking about mobile security or the endpoint security. Unified endpoint management is the technology which we are talking here. For network security, they have been inculcating the NOC, that is Network Operating Center, or secure architecture, they have been maintaining the SOC itself. So for every particular kind of technology, nowadays there are AI-related products coming into the picture. And eventually, these are the particular security which is not related with a certain IT company only. We are talking about the healthcare products, and then in the coming slides, you'll see that there are a lot of industry, and you can say a huge part of industry itself, who are actually related or correlated and having the like onus of maintaining the security in terms of cyber world itself. So that is there itself. And then here like secure application and system development is also being like enforced in a very major portion of handling the things. Now moving on further, like provide layers of protection for most important assets. In the first slide, when we are talking about defense and depth, that is DID. You know, defense and depth is something like a particular example. Like I hope like there are a lot of people who are from the northern India rather than from the southern India. So as we move towards the north, we usually have a particular like way of handling the cold. That is like by wearing a lot of layers on your body itself. So somehow like a particular jacket, a single jacket is far less efficient than when we are having a 3 or 4 level of t-shirts being worn. So something like that. It is a real life example. I'll be just now reciprocating it in the world of the cybersecurity itself. Like when we are talking about different layers, defense and depth, you know, for securing a particular information, if you're having a particular different layers of architecture, proposing the security mechanism for securing the particular information, so that is quite better rather than having a single artifact like firewall or a web application firewall. Because eventually, if that particular firewall is having a particular vulnerability existing in form of zero day vulnerability, you're gone. So for that, you need to have a layers of architectures, and eventually nowadays AI is also putting into the picture of variety of access mechanisms. So for that, you can definitely ask about a variety of policies and standards, and eventually those particular AI systems would be regularly looking towards those policies and standards and evaluating your processes of securing the information in that particular domain itself. Okay, so for that, they will be doing the assessments and doing the diagnostics, and they will be reaching to the analyst in the real-time scenario with the help of some detailed analytics and reports. And eventually, there are a lot of systems nowadays which are doing the auditing part by their own itself. So that is there itself. As well as when we are talking about last one, that is like you need to deploy the active defenses itself. Like that can be the vulnerability awareness or cyber intelligence itself. That is like threat hunting itself. Okay. And we need to do the monitoring and analytics. Nowadays, when we are talking about the monitoring, that is being done also with the help of AI and ML tools, like when we are talking about SCADA systems. Okay, I hope everyone is aware about the SCADA systems itself. So SCADA is like supervisory control and acquisition of the data. So like you might have heard about when we're talking about SCADA systems, about the Stuxnet itself. So that was related with the uranium enrichment program itself. So that was again a SCADA system, and everything was being monitored with the help of particular automated tools itself. But yes, again, these tools were not secure enough, and they were like being monitored with the help of certain processes and programs itself. And with the help of this Stuxnet malware itself, the US and the Israel government were able to infiltrate into that particular uranium enrichment program and were able to, sabotage that program and leaving the Iran government 10 years behind their proposed solution itself. So moving on further, like these are the particular industries what we are talking here when we are talking about the cybersecurity maturity model. Okay, so they have identified the 5 different models in total. The fourth model, the uppermost model, that is the 5th level itself, that is level 4, because they have started from the zero itself. So the fourth model is proactive approach. Earlier we had a discussion about the reactive approach. That means nowadays when we are talking about the most mature model, they will be having the approach of the proactiveness rather than the reactive manner. Okay, so starting from the 0 day level 0 itself, they would be having, we are assuming that they would be having the zero capabilities itself. So what are the technology, what are the industry sectors what we are talking here? The first one they have taken is the healthcare itself. The second one is the banking. Third one is the industrial one, that is kind of a manufacturing also. And then there is a fourth one, that is the insurance. Again, it's a huge thing. And if you can see, the insurance and the other sectors, which is like kind of a miscellaneous sector itself, are actually at the below the basic threshold, that is like zero capabilities itself. Okay, so TMT is also there. TMT is technology, media, and the telecommunication itself. Okay, so again, this has been taken from the current base, which is the McKinsey analysis firm itself. Okay, so this has been shown here. Okay, so अगर हम बात करते हैं तो इनका जो अलग अलग ग्राफ्स में देखते हैं तो मेच्योरिटी मॉडल में जो थ्रेशोल्ड है दैट इज level 2 itself. Most of the companies are lying behind it, and if you'll see the average, the denomination is with the help of black spot. Only 2 particular industry are having the threshold above the average itself. Like that is like healthcare and the banking sector itself. So while we are talking about the other sectors, these are lying quite behind. Even you would be assumed to know that yes, right now TMT, that is like technology, media, and telecommunications, are lying quite behind. Even there, the 75th percentile is lying below the level 2 itself. That is the mature foundation itself. That means right now they need to do a lot of work into that domain itself. And similarly, when we are talking about the consumer itself, a lot of people are there, but yes, they have certainly like just crossed the limit itself rather than the average people here. So, but yes, the sectors we need to work and actually work upon regular basis is TMT, because this is what we are talking in the critical sector other than the healthcare and the banking itself. So critical infrastructure की अगर हम बात करते हैं security domain में, so mostly हम सबसे ज़्यादा जो अपनी priority दी जाती है, that is given to the critical infrastructure rather than the other supporting infrastructure itself. Okay. So moving on further, we'll be discussing about the Indian cyber situation altogether, because eventually we are talking, we are living, and we are trying to develop the nation, this great nation. So currently, if you're talking about the number of internet users across the world, we are lying at the 2nd rank itself. And by 2040 itself, we'll be reaching to the 1st level itself. That is like right now we are reaching towards around like 680 million people altogether, while having the numbers of internet users right now. In 2040, it has been identified that this would be reaching towards the 1.5 billion people across India would be having the internet access in the world itself. Okay. Similarly, if we'll be talking about the spam sending countries across the world, India is actually having the topmost among the top 10 in the world itself, which is at the receiving end as well as the sending end. Based on that, also very recently, TRI has tried to overcome with certain kind of technologies. I hope you might have read about the DLT technology. Okay. So that is, if you have time, you can search it out on the internet. What is this DLT? This is based on the blockchain itself. So that is the technology through which they have tried to overcome the spam sending messages using SMS platform itself. Okay. Moving on the third point itself, very recently, more than 1.16 million cases of cyber attacks were reported. And when we are talking about these kind of cases, it is something like more than 3 times what we have seen in the year 2019 itself. And if we compare with the 16 itself, this is 20 times as per the government data, which was presented in the very recently in the Parliament of Government of India itself. And why is it so? Can anyone give me an example or the cause behind those increased attacks? Anyone? Okay. So this is because of what we are doing currently, that is remotely taking classes because of this corona difficult time. Because every working person has to be resorting towards a work from home, or depending on the technological aspects what we are having right now. So moving on further, currently, if we'll say that the cybersecurity market across the country was valued more than 140 billion rupees all the time. Okay, so that is there itself. Okay, and it is going to be doubled by 2025 itself, and organizations have become more aware of the risk. And if we'll just see the market, the security market, more than 800 million US dollars are being planned to be spent across the country itself by 2022 itself. And currently, if we'll see that what have been the ranking of India across the globe is we are ranking at the 10th level, which is like previous year we were standing at the 47th level itself. So we have improved a lot. But yes, we'll see the last one, that is the Pegasus. I hope everyone is aware about the Pegasus. What was the Pegasus itself? Just hold on a second. So Pegasus was actually a malware. Um, Hello.
Yes, sir.
Actually, there was an important call coming again and again. So sorry for that. When we're talking about the Pegasus, this was a kind of a spyware which was installed into the high people, high profile people across the India itself. And based on that particular leak, which was identified in very recently in July 2021 from out of India journalist people, and it made sure that cybersecurity is not a choice anymore, but this is a necessity nowadays. And we need to identify the vulnerabilities existing into the current scenarios, and we need to remove them with the help of certain tools and technology which is uh, lying ahead, and we can use them actually. So these are the particular stats what we are having right now. Like in 2018, these were around. These are again in millions itself, thousands itself, number of attacks in the thousands itself. So 2018 we received only 208,000 attacks, but it has uh, reached to the thrice the level what we are having in the 18 itself, and it is more than 40 times what we were having in the 16 itself. So that is the level currently what we are having. So when we are talking about the AI for the cybersecurity, this is a need of our right now. You know, in terms of cybersecurity, if we are leaving ourselves in the way that yes, we would be always the reactive in nature, we'll be lying behind to the schedule, and eventually it would be like a cat mouse game itself. But yes, to lie ahead for the particular this race itself, need to be proactive nature rather than the reactive in the nature itself. So cybersecurity can be the multiple one of the multiple use of artificial intelligence. Nowadays, AI is being used across the globe in various platforms, various sectors of industry itself. And I'm really hopeful that you would have been enriched by the lot of speakers for the past 4 days or so. So there was a particular report which was given by Ponemon Institute, which shows that yes, when we are talking about the global data breach recovery. Means if a particular organization, the data is being breached, they are poised with certain lot of fines and everything, and you need to give it to probably for the the affected people, or in sometimes for the governments. And the current example of that is of GDPR itself. You can just note it down, the GDPR. So this is again a particular rule law hosted from the European Union itself in 25th May 2018 itself, where they have posted that yes, any particular company which is failing to secure the customers' information without their prior knowledge or selling them out, they are liable for the fine itself. So when we are talking about these kind of breaches, we need to recover it from. So there is a particular general or the average cost involved with the recovery is around 4.24 million, which is like around 20% increase in the last year itself. Okay, so this report also indicates that company will need around 196 days on an average to recover from any data breach. That means they have to spend this much days to recover from, like there are n number of factors which will be involved into recovering, like their image itself, their revenue itself, and their products sales itself. So there are a lot of things which would be coming into the factors while just talking about the recovery from any particular data breach itself. So when we are talking about the data right now, this is the gold. Information is the gold right now when we are talking about the data or the information in the current scenario. So any particular information which is being held by a particular organization is something like having sitting on the gold right now. Okay, so right now if you'll see that there are a lot of businesses or the charities which would be having the data breaches or the attacks in the last 12 months itself. So they had temporary loss of access to files or networks. So when we're talking about the businesses, they are amassing the 11% of the whole businesses itself. Similarly, when we are talking about the software or the system corrupted or damaged, we are talking like most of the time the charities are the targeted audience, because now they are least bothered about the security mechanisms. Okay, money stolen again, because the businesses are all about the money, so they are trying to secure their money or their digital currency itself. But yes, personal data altered or destroyed or taken, only 1% of the business people are actually having that thing. Okay, so similarly, AI posed a very important role in handling these kind of attacks across the world itself. And AI actually will help them out to identify the patterns into the data, which is lying underhead or lying below or behind the curtains itself, to enable security systems to learn from the past experiences. Whatever has happened for certain cause. And then eventually, right now, a particular malware like Zeus malware, which is a banking malware or the Trojan itself, where probably based on that particular malware, the AI systems has enabled nowadays that yes, right now we are not only talking about the preferably the fileless माल आज के डेट में जो पहले malwares आ रहे थे उसकी जगह एक fileless malware आने लगा है. So now this is a matter of coming days. What we are talking is with the help of AI or machine learning or threat intelligence, we can identify. Otherwise, it is like a thing of past to identify these particular kind of attacks in the coming days itself. Okay. So in addition, AI and machine learning enable companies to reduce the incident response time. Okay, so the response time or to comply with the security best practices like the standards, what we were talking like NIST standard for the cybersecurity domain itself, or ITIL or the COBIT frameworks itself. So all these things would be, having lesser time to enforce into the organizations altogether. So AI plays a very important role in doing so. Okay. So continually, when we are talking about AI, can also provide the instant insights to just connect the dots between threads much more easily, because when we are doing this thing in a manual manner, probably we cannot make the dots which are lying like miles apart, and eventually we cannot make the context out of it. Because when we are talking about money laundering, after 9/11, when we were talking about the money laundering, US government was actually very much hell-bent on identifying that how this money is moving from certain location of Afghanistan or Sri Lanka or probably northeast of India itself to the people who are actually doing the terrorist activities across the globe itself. So, for that, again, they had to build a lot of AI-based enabled systems or business intelligence-based systems so that they can connect the dots. There are a lot of, fraud companies are being hosted at certain, tax havens across the world itself. Probably it can be Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, or probably Panama kind of states across the world itself, which would be like coming really handy. And then you are not aware that yes, money has gone into those accounts. Now you cannot access those accounts, so you cannot make out of it, and somehow that money is now emerging again in certain part of the world itself, and then is being used to buy certain defense mechanisms or some warfare material itself. So for that, you need to have the AI enabled systems ready all the time so that they can make the patterns out of it, connect the dots between the threads or probably the money what is being flowed. So for that, you need to use the AI itself or the money, machine learning itself. So machine learning is an algorithm, as you all aware about right now. Like it is capable of recognizing the patterns in the fresh data. So based on that, they can learn from the experience what they have learned in the past itself. So again, you are aware about the supervised or the unsupervised learning. So again, yes, a lot of way we can handle things. Yes, we are talking about the unstructured data rather than the structured data in the in this complex world itself. Because there are a lot of currencies we are talking here. We need to do the conversions. We need to do the arbitrage and calculations. So there are a lot of things coming into the picture, and eventually you cannot do it manually. So for that, you need to do certain codings. You need to do implement the AI-enabled systems through which you can just respond to the threats in improved and confidential manner itself, and eventually the incident response or the response to obliterate those particular threats would be much higher rather than being done with the manual way itself. Okay, so moving on further, we were discussing about the various sectors, and in that also we were discussing about the maturity models of cybersecurity itself. When we are talking about the total cost of data breach by industry, it is huge, and we are talking about the healthcare industry, it is on the top side. Okay, so there are two different kind of datas. One is of 2020, and another one is in 2021 itself. And this is something like uh, on an ever increasing basis. There is not a single particular bar graph which is having the reduction into the strength itself. So there is a large cost is involved while talking about the data breaches across the sectors or the segments itself. So, when we are talking about the average total cost of healthcare increased from 7.13 million to now 9.23 million in the healthcare itself. Okay. Similarly, when we are talking about the financial or the pharmaceutical industry, is yes, pharmaceutical industry is the only particular sector where it has reduced. Why so? Can anyone give me the rationality behind that? Even the technology has reduced. I stand corrected. Energy is also reduced. But yes, there are reasons behind it. Because right now, when we are talking about these particular incidents or the results, in 2020, when this particular trend started, that means the work from home started. That time, the pharmaceutical industries were the target to acquire the knowledge of the serum or the this particular COVID medicine itself. So the pharmaceutical industries were actually well organized and prepared themselves to be ready with the attacks across the globe itself, and eventually they stand corrected, and eventually currently they are having less total cost of data breach by the industry in the pharmaceutical, technological, and energy sector itself. Okay, so that is there. Now, moving on towards the initial attack vectors itself. In terms of cybersecurity, we usually identify the vectors which are responsible for any particular cyber attack itself. है ना? तो अगर हम उसमें देखते हैं तो biggest one is currently the business email compromise, which I was just discussing, like whaling, with the help of whaling or so they were doing it, and this is somewhere lying at the 4% of the whole segment itself. So, but yes, the cost is invigoratingly high, and this is reaching to the level of $5 million altogether. But yes, the most common one, which is the highest one in the sector wise, is around reaching around 20% of the whole sector itself. That is the compromised credentials itself. With the help of the insider attacks or the insider people or disgruntled employees, or sometimes you would have used certain clipboards to just copy your passwords and usernames. Excite है आपने देखा होगा, paste bin. I hope some of you would have used it for certain causes itself. Like mostly the developers are being using this particular thing, and eventually this is a heaven for the people who are actually the infomongers itself. Infomongers means they are trying to actually identify the useful information out of that particular waste, or the जो कूड़ा है out of that. So from that also they usually have a lot of credentials, and eventually nowadays the data breach also have a lot of data with the help of which they can create the credentials created with the help of social attacks itself. So there are particular tools and scripts through which you just have to give them the particular your information, like what's your name, what's your spouse name, where you're met, where you're born. So everything is available now with the help of the AI enabled tools. You need to create the possible solutions of the credentials itself. And most of the time, believe you me, out of all the participants present here right now, I can definitely vouch that yes, some of you would have used your mobile phone as your credentials or the passwords. Sometimes your date of anniversary, date of birth, or sometimes your spouse name would be the part of your credentials itself. So eventually, with the help of AI-enabled tools, nowadays hackers are turning the tables from upside down itself, and eventually they are compromising the credentials. Again, the whaling is having the highest data breaches cost, whereas phishing is not leaving behind, and eventually it is 4.65. Similarly, like vulnerability in the third-party softwares or the cloud misconfiguration, although this is at a very lower level because the cloud has reached the maturity level right now. Okay, and similarly, physical security compromise is nowadays very much less. In the years of Kevin Mitnick itself, who is known to be the biggest social engineering hacker itself in the history of mankind right now, as far as I have concerned and read across the time. So, there are a variety of attack vectors which are being mentioned here, and eventually every particular attack vector is nowadays from the flip side of the coin also is being accessed with the help of AI-enabled softwares, and eventually for the defenders also we can use the AI or ML itself to identify the patterns lying underhead of these particular attack vectors itself, so that to safeguard their companies and the industry sectors itself. Okay. So this is the state of security, AI, and automation comparing the three level of deployments starting from the year 2019 to 2021 itself. So currently, if we are talking about the variety of organizations, there is a 35% of the share which have yet to deploy. Instead of 2019, this was the 38% or 48%, and now it is reaching to the level of 35% itself. And some of them has partially deployed this. We are talking about the security, AI, and automation in the industrial sectors, and then we are not talking about the single industrial sector. We are talking about all of them, whatever has been amalgamated, and where the security is much needed right now. And starting and comparing from the 19 only 16 were fully deployed, and now the 25% of that means 1/4 of the full sector is now having enabled AI enabled softwares to secure their systems and the infrastructure across the globe itself. Okay, this is something like the data breaches to identify the data breach and the contain the data breach itself. Okay, so these we are talking about the earlier one, like not deployed, partially deployed, and fully deployed itself. So here, when we are talking about the not deployed, they actually these particular sectors will take at least 239 days in total to identify the particular data breach into their systems. Whereas for that particular data breach to contain, they will take around more than 85 days, which is comprising of total 324 days. That means these are the companies which are not at all aware about AI or not have been involving the AI and the automation into their own industrial people or the processes or the technological. That is PPT. Okay, so for that, they will take at least 324 days to recover from a data breach itself. As compared with this particular thing, with the fully deployed model, this is coming to 47 days. Okay, that is like a huge 80 days difference. That's it. That is some tentative that 80 days difference itself, which is reaching around the 3 months time itself. And this is something like what we are taking as an average itself. It all depends on the sector wise and identification wise of a particular sector, that yes, it has been there, but yes, average gives you the results in terms of the whole industry itself. So partially deployed is something in the middle, that is 289 itself, and that is the level what is the AI being providing them. And then 3 months time is a huge time, and we are talking about the recovering from the risk and identifying the data breaches as well. Okay, when we're talking about the cyber landscape, there are malicious actors into that. In Deloitte, actually, like it was actually a data breach which actually identified was in 17 only, and the breach actually occurred in October or November 16. They are not really sure about it. Okay, so that is there actually. And then when we are talking about the data breaches, 2022 they have just posed that yes, it is reaching to the 2.5 trillion itself. And when we're talking about the source is Juniper Research and the Wall Street Journal, they have mentioned that by 2022 itself, more than 140 billion needs to be spent on cybersecurity itself, and eventually the biggest portion of that also would be of AI enabled softwares itself. Okay, they have mentioned some of the other particular firms whose data was actually breached altogether. Okay, when we are talking about cybersecurity operations, the cost is actually increasing without mitigating the risk. We are not talking about the risk mitigation here. Mitigation means you are trying to completely mitigate that risk. Means now the risk won't be there in your system. That is like itself a distant dream right now without the AI enabled softwares itself. So अगर हम बात करते हैं, there are a lot of security ops we have been doing, because nowadays everything is being automated right now, and we need to have a lot of people. We need to have a lot of security operations to do the work altogether. Just hold on a second. I'll be back. Just give me 1 minute. Hold on a second. Hi everyone. Sorry for the interruption. I hope this gives you a break in middle. When we are talking about we need to have a favorable equilibrium across the cybersecurity domain itself. We need to scale the security operations. We need to have some assistive decisions. Eventually, these decisions would be done not a manual way. It would be needed that yes, right now there are technologies lying underneath, and based on the data available with you or the industry itself, we need to identify that how this particular information would be coming handy for you in terms of decision making of a particular thing or so. Like right now, just give you an example. uh, Probably a bank is there, and eventually they are just trying to come over a particular conclusion that rather than having the basic firewall or the hardware firewall itself, shall we go for a particular thing that is something like a service oriented no, SOC service secure operating center itself. So for that particular decisions, you need to have some data or backing or the rationality behind your decision itself. So those AI enabled particular decision makers will provide you the data that right now, if you are looking towards the banking industry itself, like there is a total cost of breach is which is reaching towards 4.8 million dollars a year itself. And in when we are talking about the amalgamation of the technology, if you are not doing or not implementing, again the same thing will arise like this one. How much days would be there needed? Like that is like 324 days would be there required for a certain organization out of 365 days. That means you are left with only 40 days to do the business part, because you are right now busy in handling the data breach and contain it and then somehow mitigate the risk which is associated with this particular data breach itself. You need to improve the responsiveness also, because there is a compromise. You need to overtake the risk, and we can see with the help of this particular slide that right now the responsiveness without AI enabled softwares is 85 days, and partially one is having the 75 days 77 days. And when we are talking about the fully deployed, this is we are talking only 63 days as compared to other particular way of implementing the technologies. We need to be proactive as well. And proactiveness comes only when we are talking about the amalgamation of future advanced technology. Okay. So for that, we need to have AI in the cybersecurity itself. So there are a lot of terms which is coming into the picture, and eventually, I think you might have read about these particular terms in the previous lectures or slides itself. But yes, these are the things which we have categorized, which would be needed, much needed for the cybersecurity domain itself. We need to operationalize tasks, unko automate karna hai. We need to derive actionable intelligence out of those particular tasks and the actions and the responses being done with the help of that particular process itself. So we need to derive the actionable intelligence out of it. We need to actually remove the noise. Means like there is a data, huge data, that is the unstructured data right now. And out of that, you need to maintain that, yes, I need to get the useful inference out of that data, which is unstructured. That means you need to remove the noise out of it. We need to structure it. We need to refine it. And then based on that particular inference, you will take certain decisions itself. You need to mitigate the human biasness, because eventually every human being cannot claim or complain that, yes, I don't have any particular biasness towards a particular decision or so. Human being can be emotional. Human being can be having certain emotions, like sometimes he is angry with a particular, or she is angry with a particular organization or so, because he or she was fired from that organization. But yes, they are really good at mitigating the risk for that certain organization where currently the person is working. So and eventually in terms of you know signature based or anomaly based systems, when we're talking about that, preferably we'll assume that yes, the person might have joined the office or so in very odd time. But yes, machines will never make these kind of biasness all the time. Okay, they need to present complete security context, and this should be in the real time scenario rather than daily report basis. When we are talking about the manual way of handling the cyber security, preferably like CTO or CISO, would be providing to the CEO on a regular basis in a manual manner that yes, these are the reports and we are handling the particular issues or the data breach as per the current scenario or the reports says or so. But yes, when we are talking about the amalgamation of AI, we are having the real-time based input from these particular technologies. We need to assess the risk on a real time again. We need to provide them expert advice with the help of AI-enabled softwares, as well as like we need to develop the predictive capabilities. Like they can predict out of the current scenarios that right now when we are talking about ransomwares, type of ransomwares, we are only talking about the ransomwares right now. That means that the ransomwares are of certain type, and based on the data available of a variety of ransomwares, can you predict that what would be the certain capabilities of the hackers in the coming days itself? As you are aware that right now, when we are talking about the North Pipeline in the US attack, where the hackers actually demanded $5 million from that pipeline company, and then leaving the around like more than 20 million people across the country stranded for running for the electricity or the gasoline itself. And eventually, like if the software, the security softwares were able to predict the capabilities of hackers firsthand, believe you me, these kind of incidents would have been stopped at that moment of time itself. We need to identify the best practices based on the certain current scenarios as well as your frameworks currently working. You know, रजनीश जी, आपका कोई क्वेश्चन है तो पूछ सकते हैं, otherwise I'll be just putting you in disable mic itself. Thank you. So, if we'll be revisiting the cybersecurity life cycle, we need to initially detect the threats and the risk eventually. Like when we are talking about cybersecurity, they also do have a life cycle of that. So for that, they will have to detect the threats and the risk itself. So for that, what are the key requirements we need to monitor on a regular basis of anomalous activity or current or potential threats? We need to identify those particular threats. For that, actually, what would be the activities? We need to integrate or configure the systems as per the current scenarios. We need to do the manual threat hunting itself. And then traditionally operations kya hote the uske andar? For those particular people, when we are talking about cyber security life cycle, there would be instrumented and automated, but required the deployment integration altogether. Just give an example of probably like Spectre के बारे में सुना किसी ने? Or Meltdown. These were vulnerabilities lying into the systems of AMD and Intel chipsets or processors itself. So, the biggest threat was related with the cloud centers itself. And eventually, when we were talking like these kind of vulnerabilities were existing and identified or uncovered in the world publicly, that time the cloud service providers had to undergo right now the patching management of those particular Intel chipsets machines or the large number of servers they have hosted at their end itself. That is again a huge operations being done manually right now rather than having the automated manner done. Okay, we need to identify the or create the pattern or signature or rule-based detections. The rule like you need to create the Yara-based rules also. So that is again the detection of the threats and the risk. And when we're talking about alerts, again we need to generate a lot of alerts manually right now. And when we're talking about the amalgamation of AI, these threats or the alerts would be generated in a real time and in an automated manner itself. And just we can have the name of Splunk technology, which is kind of a big data analytics technology, which is useful for SOC implement itself. So Splunk does provide you that particular way of generating huge amount of alerts in an automated manner itself. Similarly, the next step would be like investigating and qualification of the security alerts itself. Like whatever the alerts have been given to the particular person who is responsible for managing the security arrangements of that particular part, you need to do a lot of classification of those alerts also. We need to validate those alerts. We need to assess the risk attached with those particular threats. We need to identify whether it is coming into my scope or not. Okay, यहाँ पे जब हम बात करते हैं कभी भी security के अंदर there is a particular term which is known as scope. Scope means what is your area of coverage or area of working itself. You need to identify in a regular scenarios itself. Last but not least, that is the incident response and the governance itself. Like whatever has incident has occurred or the risk has actually like taken place right now. For that, what kind of incident or the response has been taken from the security personals we need to identify. So for that, probably like manual security assessments needs to be done. Sometimes experimental knowledge of individuals would come really reliant, and eventually the company would be relying on that part only. But with the amalgamation of AI, this would be totally gone. You know? So that is there actually. So when we are talking about the applied AI itself, है ना, जहाँ पे हम बात कर रहे हैं context aware AI itself, so there would be detection of threats and the risk in certain manner itself. Starting from late 90s and the early 2000 itself, you had those particular classifiers for the spam filtering, which was known as naive based. So that is the application area of the AI into the cybersecurity domain by just spam filtering in the mail servers itself. Okay, so that was incident classification. So it is kind of a recognition type or type of threat was identified in a certain manner itself. Like for network anomaly, like there is a huge rush of packets and there is a regularly clogging of network or bottlenecking of the network. So for that, they actually devised a particular algorithm which was known as halt winter algorithm itself. Okay, so moving on further in the late 2000 or mid 2000s, uh, they actually tried to anomaly detection with the help of some baseline behaviors. There was a threshold, and on based on certain threshold, they had certain criterias. If someone is actually accessing or moving above that threshold, there would be an alert. And eventually, like most of the time, this was a false positive rather than the true positive itself. Okay. So mid 2010 and something like they usually started looking towards the profiling of the actors and activities by constructing dynamic models. That means like the like जो आपका जो एक term है attribute based encryption means earlier there were rules. ठीक है, रोल्स होते थे, रोल्स के अंदर आप है ना किसी भी पर्टिकुलर यूजर को फिट करते थे कि दिस इज अ रोल ऑफ एडमिन, दिस इज अ रोल ऑफ डेटाबेस एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर, दिस इज अ रोल ऑफ डेटाबेस मैनेजर इटसेल्फ. बट नाउअडेज we have reached to the ABE itself. Like attribute based encryption means attribute based you are able to access a particular situation. Like if a particular person is reaching to a certain location, like now the person is from assistant manager to senior manager or senior executive manager itself, and now the person need not to be escalated from a certain role from another role to a different role right now. Now with the help of those attributes what he or she is handling right now, based on that the profiling of the actor would be defined, and eventually they can access those particular resources or the processes altogether. And in the current scenario, when we are talking about these kind of things, we are trying to optimize the attack detection through observational or reinforcement or deep nets itself. Okay, there is a recurrent model, and based on that, we are trying to malware generated domains. And then, we are talking in terms of these malwares which are fileful malware, means they are having some files, they are having some data. But yes, coming days, there are fileless malwares, which are actually not lying into your hard disk itself, and eventually they are lying and attached with some of the processes which are ongoing with your operating system itself, and eventually this is really hard to identify. And as we in cybersecurity usually say that yes, if your machine is running you're utilizing the CPU cycles more in nature, even if you are not doing any particular work, you can identify that yes, your system is infected with certain malware or some spyware itself. But yes, for that you need to have the cognition installed in your machines itself. That is the like proactive prioritization. You need to anticipate, you need to learn from the current environment itself, you need to adapt with that environment and eventually take some certain proactive actions on those events or the outcomes itself. So that is the part of applied AI itself, which is context aware AI itself. And so the key reasons is basically what, while just including the artificial intelligence or the machine learning into the cybersecurity domain, that is the automated detection. There is a particular technology which usually we are trying to overcome, that is deep packet inspection itself. Like deep packet inspection actually identified the patterns into the hidden packets at various layers itself. In my graduation time, we were trying to identify or create a particular mechanism through which we can just use the headers of IPv4, which are not used on a regular basis, like IPsec header, which was actually, like uh, you can say it was not actually like by default a useful header. IPv6, IPsec is compulsory one of the important header, and needs to be filled. But yes, in IPv4 it was not actually mandatory. So we were trying to install certain information into that header, and eventually at the resource end, we were trying to get the information undetected, from all those networks delivered to that particular location. So, but yes, nowadays there is a particular technology which is known as deep packet inspection itself. And with the help of deep packet inspection, we can identify that what particular information is being sent from one location to another, even in the case of encrypted data itself. So we need to create certain automated detection technology with the help of AI itself. Okay, so detection level means the monotony of detecting threats is not led by a human, meaning fewer human errors. That means there is not a biasness. Thanks to the machine learning and AI, we can learn and adapt through the experiences what we have taught earlier itself. So there is a huge data which is already lying ahead across the institutions, and they are actually creating and testing and providing them the sample or some testing data, so that training data itself, based on that they can identify the patterns and learn themselves and create certain models, so that we can do the automation testing itself. Okay, so even the user's unusual activity or the behavior can be identified itself. Okay, so that is there. They can also build models for pattern recognition rather than relying on the human to build them itself. They can be done automated manner. Okay, तो अगर हम बात करते हैं AI is also can be trained to create a lot of data which is being read from the news stories or the blogs. Like now, the whatever the threats are coming, with the help of this data, they can predict it, like whether the data would be useful or not. So this is like a user's reasoning to identify threats with the help of artificial intelligence. Okay. Error-free cybersecurity, like when we are talking about the passwords, we usually forget the passwords. We usually draft in your phone to remember it, and sometimes the password for different accounts is hard to remember all the time. So for that, AI is coming really handy when we are talking about biometric-based verifications. Apple's Face ID recognition technology, preferably on 17th of September, Apple has uh, announced to use the Apple Face ID 2 rather than the Apple Face ID currently. So now the recognition technology has been making much more advanced what we were having in the earlier days. Initial days when this Face ID was launched, with the help of a certain replica of a human being in a certain scenario, or the putting a photo in front of the Apple phone itself, it would unlock the phone itself. But nowadays, they have trained the model in such a manner that they can differentiate between the actual human face or the replica of that thing, or probably like if there are two siblings which are altogether similar way, but yes, there are certain patterns which are lying underneath, and eventually they can make out of that also. So artificial intelligence is playing a very important role in every aspects of technological advantage across the life. Again, preventing the phishing attacks is again the part of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So 97% of internet users can be misguided by a sophisticated phishing attack. Again, the report says or so. But yes, it can be dealt with the help of AI and ML tools itself. Okay, with the help of the NLP, with the help of grammar checking, and sometimes with the patterns, what the actually the company is sending the mails towards the consumers or the customers itself. Okay, and when we are talking about the phishing sources, they actually scans a lot of them and defend themselves in a real-time scenarios itself. Okay. Yes, we have very less time, so we need to cover as much as possible. So faster response time is there. like when we are talking about, they have mentioned the example also, like IBM Watson is there, which has actually injected more than 2 billion documents in the corpus and actually adds on a regular basis. And eventually they are trying to analyze with the help of whatever the documents have been like found on the internet itself. And like with the help of those documents, probably they might be infected with some macros enabled spywares or malwares itself. So that again causes a havoc on the organizations, like in the terms of ransomware, in terms of some spyware or a hidden malware itself. So for that, actually, Watson is just like reading, analyzing those particular malware signatures, and eventually securing or responding those to the newly coming developed attacks in the real-time scenarios. Sometimes a malware signature pattern is there, and eventually with the help of certain changing or obfuscation of that particular code of the malware, probably like it is no more identified by a manual threat hunter itself. But yes, with the help of IBM Watson or certain tools which are AI enabled tools, they can identify in a real time scenarios. Okay, but very recently, like there is a particular protein codes are there in your human genome itself. But yes, we couldn't identify every protein structure all the time. So the Google actually initiated a particular strategy in that they actually created those particular they gave a database of the known protein structures, and based on certain scenarios they analyzed and created the upcoming protein structures in a real time scenario. It is something like that right now. Like initial days, you would have all read about the periodic tables itself. Like if you have been given a particular table's initial element and the last element, you could make it out that what would be the middle elements of that particular periodic table itself. But yes, in that the factors were quite limited, and based on that you would identify manually. But when we are talking about the number of documents going into like trillions or billions or millions itself, it is next to impossible for a manual intervention or identification of that thing. So for that, you need to have some AI-enabled software so that your response time would be getting faster day by day itself. So how AI can improve the cybersecurity with the help of like variety of technology involved in that. Like threat hunting, अगर हम बात करते हैं, in that case, signature-based techniques can be detected by more than 90%, and with the help of replacing the traditional techniques, we can increase by 4%. But yes, we would also have the false positive cases. So for that, what we can do, we can amalgamate the traditional methods and the AI, and we can result to the exact 100% detection rate and minimize the false positive. Although this is kind of an optimal situation, probably we can reach to the level of 99.97 or so. But yes, that is there itself. Okay, companies also uses the AI to enhance the threat hunting process. Like I hope everyone is aware about or would have seen the movies like Iron Man, in which there was a particular AI-enabled assistance which was known as Jarvis. So based on that, they could identify that what is going on across the world, and eventually that particular AI-enabled assistant would tell you that where to launch the attack from our end. So similarly, the threat hunting would be done with the help of AI-enabled tools across the globe, and eventually they were able to process high volumes of endpoint data all the time. So while moving towards the vulnerability managements, we were talking about like in 2019 only, there were more than 20,362 new vulnerabilities. And we are talking about these vulnerabilities across variety of technologies. Can anyone tell me that how much of the vulnerabilities, are there? सबसे ज़्यादा किसका होता है vulnerabilities में से? And because of that, actually, that particular technology was no more there, and it has been now obsolete from web technology itself. That was having the most vulnerabilities exploited and identified across the globe on a regular basis. Something like on a regular day, you will have a single vulnerability into that system or the technology itself. Can anyone give me the name of that vulnerability or the technology for which the vulnerabilities were discovered on a regular basis? Anyone? Okay, let it be. that was Adobe Flash Layer. I hope that you are aware with the amalgamation of Web 5.0 or sorry, HTML 5.0, the Adobe Flash Player has been made obsolete nowadays. You are not forced to use Adobe Flash Player all the time. So that has been revoked, and even Adobe has also agreed to remove the Flash Player from their product itself. So similarly, there is a new term which is coming into the picture, that is UEBA, that is user and event behavioral analytics. So whatever the user or the events, based on the behavior, the analytics being provided to the end user, the AI enabled or machine learning enabled techniques can identify or analyze the baseline behavior of the user accounts, sometimes the endpoints, sometimes the servers, and then you can identify the zero-day unknown attacks itself or zero-day vulnerabilities itself. So eventually, this is coming really in the earlier these were like kind of a science fiction itself, but nowadays these are in a regular basis being used. There is a particular term XDR, endpoint detection response. So again, they are using these particular technologies amalgamated into themselves, so that it would be coming handy for any sector of industry to just leverage these particular technology and mitigate the risk of data leakage or account compromise or so. And eventually, like when we're talking about the data centers, you know for managing the data centers, you need to have a lot of energy being consumed. So in that also, very recently, the Google has devised a particular tool, and like I have had with another computer itself. I'll just give you the name so that you can refer it to afterwards. Like yeah, this is like DeepMind. This is a project of Google itself, in which they actually AI-powered recommended systems were there, and based on that, they could identify where we need to optimize the energy resources all the time. So they could reduce the consumption of their power by 15% after implementing AI within the data centers in 2016. So again, this is a huge amount when we are talking about the data center, because we are not talking about the single data center itself. Okay. And again, 40% cooling cost is being reduced. Thus, somehow they are also helping in overtaking the greenhouse effect across the globe itself. So for network securities, policies and topographies are being added and checked and identified and evaluated based on the AI systems itself. And they can learn the network traffic patterns and recommending the functional grouping of workloads and the security policies. Like right now, we were doing it manually, but currently, if we are seeing that based on your workload, based on your timings of doing the management of resources, security policies are being modified, or the recommendations would be provided to the administrator on a real-time basis itself. So that is there with the help of AI-enabled tools itself. So moving now towards some other sectors, that is the military sector itself. So, White House in a single report on AI, they mentioned that AI's central economic effort in the short term will be automation of tasks that could not be automated before itself. AI will also make military and intelligence activity that currently requires the efforts of many people achievable with fewer or without the people also. Nowadays, need not to have the people amalgamated in your certain, activities like your spy activities or so. And, with the help of unmanned air vehicles or unmanned ground vehicles, you can reach and do the sophisticated activities across the globe. And eventually, like when we are talking about unmanned air vehicles, एक UAV की cost probably $1 million आती है, and then when we are talking about the C2 Globemaster, which is kind of a huge Hulk plane which can take more than 20 tanks at a time. So that cost you around like $1 billion altogether. So even when we're talking about 1 million and 1 billion itself, if we purchase 100 of those devices and plan an attack on C2 Globemaster, eventually the Globemaster will never stand a chance because they are devised, they are designed to take take control or take charge for not more than 10 or 20 Raptors or F-22 planes or so, but we are talking here hundreds of numbers. But yes, these actually prices are giving them a chance. And even currently, as it has been mentioned also here, like ISIS is also making noteworthy use of remotely controlled aerial drones in their own military operations. And very recently, you would have read into the newspapers that while retreating from the Afghanistan, the US Army actually has left a lot of devices for those people, and eventually that particular technology is now into the wrong hands itself. And there is a particular statement being given by one of the admiral of commander of US command itself, that artificial intelligence and machine learning, I would argue, is foundational to the future of cyber security. We have got to work our way through how we are going to deal with this. If not the if, it is only the when to me itself. Okay, so that is the implication of the cyber security in the military domain itself. There are like lethal autonomous weapons from the bulk of military forces. Like right now, the Russian Military Industrial Committee has approved that more than 30% of Russian combat power will consist of remote control and autonomous robotic platforms by 2030. They have already decided it. Even like the smaller countries, if they are having some AI driven military or like operations or some offensive operations like Japan or Israel, which are like having a demographic challenges also, they are may find lethal or autonomous weapons especially appealing, because eventually they need not to have the like audience or controlling figures to manage those things, because eventually these are AI driven solutions and they can create havoc on the currently like any particular part of the world itself. So there would be like disruptive swarming technologies and like the traditional military platforms like the artillery or the like, your infantry would be obsolete then. Okay, robotic assassination is common and difficult to attribute. Like a single robot consisting of a nano size, if it is there and going and injecting the lethal poison into a certain particular national figure, no one can identify that who actually came to that location and somehow killed that person. In 2017 only, I wrote a particular chapter for a particular book in which the cyber murder was discussed. And these kind of technologies are nowadays not more the science fiction, and eventually anyone can access them and eventually execute them as per their own requirements itself. Okay, like mobile robotic IEDs will be there, which would be precision guiding missiles. Like there would be precision guiding missiles. Earlier days, it was actually a kind of myth. But when US actually started, everyone started believing that yes, these kind of things are already there. So with the help of the AI, these are nowadays not the thing of past. Coming days, it would be like a piece of cake for a particular individual also. SpaceX is there already, and with the help of the AI enabled tools, now they have reached to the level of NASA in the last 5 or 10 years itself. And NASA took around 50 years down the line to reach to that zenith level itself. That is the level and strength of AI itself. Okay. And leaving aside, like there are a lot of things like theft and replication of the military intelligence AI will represent an AI cyber weapons falling into the wrong hands. Means like you would have read about like the China actually stole the particular F-32 Raptor plane designs from the US government. But yes, they could not make it possible that yes, overnight they can create those particular Raptor planes at the China's mainland itself. But yes, if we are talking about some certain softwares or the hardwares, preferably like Operation Prism, in which the US was actually trying to read all the messages across the globe of every particular nations or militaries, so that they could make out that how they are working and all. Believe you me, if this kind of software falls into wrong hands, eventually you are giving away the whole solution to them. Need not to create a solution from the from the base itself, because the code is itself the tool itself. So that is the scenario which can be the transformative one into the cyber defense itself. And currently, if you are seeing that DARPA is also working into the bringing AI into the cyber defense itself, because it's quite a labor-intensive process, and we are short of labors when we are talking about the cyber security itself. So the AI will enable new paradigm for the cyber defense itself altogether.
Arun sir,
Okay. Yeah.
sir, we have next session at 11:30. So can you please wind up your presentation, and we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
take the question from the audience.
Okay. Just last slide, and then we can just move ahead. Okay, so these are the implications for the information superiority across the globe while having the AI in your mind itself. Like earlier days, we were talking about the collection and analysis of data with the help of big data analysis also. But yes, nowadays there is a new term which is coming into the picture, that is the creation of the data in the media with the AI enabled softwares. I hope that everyone is aware about the deep fake. Okay, so deepfake actually creates the images, the videos, the audios without taking the consent of that particular, audience itself. So that is nowadays no more a science fiction. In earlier days, I was about to showcase you a particular video of, one particular movie that was of. Let's see, Die Hard 4, in which there was a particular scene in which a particular hacker has like amalgamated variety of in US presidents and creating and broadcast messages across the US itself. But nowadays it is not much needed. You need to have the particular model trained in such a manner that yes, right now the who is the president, you are actually having lots of videos across the platform on internet with the help of like YouTube or other services, and you can train your model and create a new image or new replica of that thing in no time itself, and eventually no one can identify and deduce that yes, this is a fake one or the actual one itself. Even Barack Obama actually posted a video in which he was speaking the things which he is not supposed to speak or has never spoken also. But these kind of things actually poses a very important role on the AI-enabled softwares to identify and take action against those particular fake images, fake videos, or fake news itself in coming days. And again, eventually, the existence of widespread AI forgery capabilities will erode the social trust, preferably in the in the social media or society itself altogether, which needs to be dealt with right now. So I rest my case here, and eventually, like these are the some thought process what I thought to have to share with all of you, which are there, and eventually AI is playing a very important role in variety of sectors across the globe itself. So, any questions from the audience side? I'll be really happy to answer any of them. Anyone? I was around like short of 3 or 4 slides. Yes, this is okay with it. And the dark side of AI, just to mention that thing, that right now, like we can surveil all of the people across the globe on everyday basis. Like just having the snapshot of the across the globe with the help of this like satellite constellation, and eventually like every people who is walking on Earth can be like noted down, and eventually every activity of that particular person would be noted down anytime in a real time basis itself. So that is the dark side. And the coming days, security or the privacy would be going to be a myth. Even very recently, Apple has also stated that yes, they'll be scanning all the messages across the their SMS services or iMessage service or iCloud services to identify whether they have contained certain child pornographic material or so. So eventually, earlier days, the Apple was saying that yes, privacy is being the foremost thing from my side, but with the help of AI-enabled tools, that is no more there itself. Okay, so that is the case currently ongoing. I wanted to get associated with everyone. So, any questions? I'd be really happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll just conclude my session. Anyone? I now can definitely see the chat, but yes, I don't see any chat being posted here. Bukia sir, Princey ma'am, if you can help me out if there is a particular chat or request coming from anyone from the audience side.
Any question from audience?
Even in my video also, you can see the application of AI itself. Like my background is actually the virtual one. With the help of this particular tool, we can just create these kind of things in real-time scenarios itself. Although like there is this like blurry things are coming, but with the advancement of coming days, these would be like things of past itself. Anyone? Although like I never wanted to discuss the AI in a much deeper sense because you had a lot of sessions included altogether for AI. So I just wanted to touch up the surface of cybersecurity domain amalgamated with the AI and ML itself. I think there are no questions from the audience side.
Arun sir, thank you for your presentation. So I request all the participants to please switch on your camera so that we can take a group photo. Thank you, sir, again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your nice presentation. So we'll wind up this presentation now. So
Thank you, sir.
request all the participants. So please wait 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the next session will start. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
सिग्नेचर चाहिए होगा ना, बट तुम ही पता क्या करो, तुम जो तुम्हारा इनवॉइस था ना उसी में तुम कोई अकाउंट नंबर लिख के वैसा इनवॉइस
One more announcement. The feedback form will be shared in the chat box and the WhatsApp group. Please fill this form and submit it. Okay. Thank you.
তীব্র কিন দেখিও এটা মাইক্রো কলার
will called as